Pastor Doug here from Crossroads. It's great to be with you. I hope that today's message will draw you closer to Jesus.
Have you ever bought something online and when it actually was arrived at your door, it was not what you expected it to be? Like you saw something on Instagram perhaps, and you just had to have it, so you ordered it without touching it, without seeing it. It came in the mail and it was not what you expected, and huge disappointment followed. Well, this happened to me this past Easter. I found online these wonderful Easter eggs, plastic Easter eggs that were stuffed with these little stuffed animals, and I thought, oh, our granddaughter would love this. So I ordered a box of 24. Well, they were delivered, and this is what I got. Look at this mistake, right? This was not what I expected. I put a highlighter here for dimension. These eggs were small. The animals inside were like, let me out, it's Easter. And they were haphazardly taped together. Someone went through the line and just taped these guys. I did not touch this. This is exactly what these great stuffed animals stuffed in an Easter egg look like. What I had to do was run to the dollar store, buy the really big eggs, and restuff these just so my granddaughter could have some smiles on Easter. We still play with these. She takes them out and in and out and in. But this was not what I expected. Thinking you have one thing, but getting another. Sometimes our discipleship can look this way. It's actually, we think it's one thing, but it's actually something else, another. We think we are spiritually mature, but in reality, there are areas of our lives where we are immature because we haven't given God full access to move us, to change us. Instead, we stay in the shallow end. We don't see that our faith can be so much more, that there's a full and rich life that God wants us to embrace, a life we never expected to have. Last week, Pastor Doug kicked off our new series, and he reminded us that God doesn't want us to be stuck. Crossroads Church doesn't want us to be stuck. If you're stuck in a strained relationship or a season of life, if you're stuck in a difficult phase, stuck in your past, or if you're stuck in your spiritual walk, let's determine to get unstuck. This is our church-wide fall campaign based on this book by Peter Scazzaro, The Emotionally Healthy Discipleship, moving from shallow Christianity to deep transformation. And if you know Jesus, you are on a journey with him. You are walking with him. You are moving with him, transformed every day as you get to know him more and more and more. But if you're here today or you're joining us online and Jesus is not your Lord yet, maybe you're just kicking the tires of Christianity a bit, I am so glad you're here because we are in this journey together. We're all tuned in. And over these next weeks, we will talk about what deeply changed disciples of Jesus looks like. But we need a place to start. We need a place that names where we are, but also sheds light for the journey ahead. So consider with me, as we start, consider with me that we have the roots of a discipleship system that too often results in people who are less whole, less human, and less like Jesus, rather than more whole, more human, and more like Jesus. More like Jesus, that's our goal. And as we move toward that goal, that's the journey of every Christ follower. Sometimes we make big advances, we make big moves, strides. But sometimes we stumble, we slip, we even go backwards in our discipleship journey. Or we feel content where we are. We're satisfied where we are. But friends, life with Jesus is so much more than we ever imagined. So we have some exciting weeks ahead. But this morning, let's look at a few things that might stand in the way of becoming spiritually mature. The book calls them failures. That's a hard word for me to swallow. But let's talk about failures that undermine deep discipleship, and there are 4. First, we may tolerate emotional immaturity. Real quick, let's just look at that word immaturity for a minute. Immaturity means that someone lacks the level of development expected for their age. They might lack empathy or responsibility, have poor self-control for someone who ought to be measuring different in that area. Society says that they haven't met an accomplishment for that age. They're immature. If you've ever been called immature, it's probably not a compliment. And spiritual immaturity is something we work toward. And emotional immaturity is not a compliment either. So maybe our expectations of what it means to be spiritual have blurred a bit. And we no longer see the inconsistencies of being spiritually mature but emotionally immature. Maybe we've learned to accept emotional immaturity when we say that you can be a Christ follower for many years and be a detached spouse or angry parent at home. We've grown to accept that you can be a church leader and yet be unteachable, to be insecure and defensive. We've grown to accept emotional immaturity when we say that you can quote the Bible with ease and still be unaware of how quickly you react to what other people say. You can be hurt by the harsh comment of a coworker, but justify saying nothing because you want to avoid conflict at all cost. We've grown to accept the inconsistency of being spiritually mature, but also emotionally immature, when we say that you can serve tirelessly on the welcome team, serve in the staff cafe, be a worship band member, be on church board, be a greeter, and yet carry resentment because there's little personal time for healthy balance in your life. No time for self-care. And we've learned to accept emotional immaturity if we say that you can lead a ministry with little transparency rather than sharing your struggles and weaknesses because you still want other people to think you have your act together. Where did we get the idea that it's possible to be spiritually mature while remaining emotionally immature? It's like we've easily disconnected emotional health from spiritual health. We remain in shallow water because it's comfortable there. But it's impossible to be spiritually mature if there are inconsistencies in our emotional maturity. In short, God is calling us to deeper emotional discipleship, which will lead to deeper levels of spiritual maturity. He might be calling you to deeper discipleship by asking you to measure your love for God by the degree to which you love others. Friends, God is super clear on some basic biblical truths. Truths like He is the one true God. The only way to God is through His Son, Jesus Christ. He is holy, unchanging, and faithful. The biblical truth that salvation is an undeserved gift from God. And the biblical truth that we are commanded to love God and our neighbor. Measure your love for God by the degree to which you love others. In Matthew 5, Jesus tells us how important it is for us to understand the connection between loving God and loving others. We cannot think that we can separate them or that we have the option of one or the other. Jesus says, therefore, If you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. In these verses, Jesus is giving us a command for what our worship should look like. He's connecting our love for him and our love for others. He says, your worship, your gifts, oh, they're so beautiful. I'm glad you brought them. But when you come, think about where your love lies. Think about where your heart is. And if you remember something between you and someone else that you have the power to reconcile, please go do that first and then come back and worship me. In his ministry, Jesus spoke an awful lot about loving God and loving others. He taught that these actions are inseparable. Measuring your love for God by the degree to which you love others can help us move from shallow Christianity to deep transformation. A second way that God is calling us to deeper discipleship is to understand that while we are spiritual beings, that is only one aspect of who we are. Did you know that our emotions are an essential part of what makes us human? God created us, and we are beautifully complex. We are more than our physical bodies. We are emotional and spiritual and social and intellectual people too. And we simply can't be one of those 5 aspects without the other parts. I really like this diagram from the book. What I see here is there is a spiritual aspect of being a man or a woman, but there are 4 other aspects too. This tells me that there will be times when socially I'm okay and times when I'm not. Times when I will be physically okay, but I might not be okay emotionally. Times when I have big feelings, and that's okay too. Sitting with a friend and helping them hold any of these 5 aspects of being human is a beautiful way to love others. But the rich and important truth to grasp when we see this is that Jesus meets us in all 5 areas of our life, all 5 ways that God created us. I'm so glad that he sees that our emotions are part of us and he meets us right there. But part of being emotionally mature is recognizing how our emotions affect us, how they affect others, and then identifying the things that it takes to make those things right with ourselves and right with other people. Self-awareness, responsibility, and accountability are marks of healthy emotional maturity. As we work to become more like Jesus, let's understand the connection between emotional maturity and spiritual maturity, but not elevate the spiritual and lower the emotional. Our relationship with Jesus hits a whole new level of awesome when we embrace emotions as an essential part of how God created us. A second failure that undermines deep discipleships and keeps us from being spiritually mature is that we emphasize doing for God over being with God. This may be a surprise to you, but I am incredibly task-driven. Some of you can relate. Honestly, I've had to re-examine my life over and over as an adult because I struggle with being busy and being with God. I need to regularly evaluate my work time, my free time, my time with God, and I do not consistently get these right in my life. And some days, they're not even close to being balanced. And when they're not, my husband can tell, my friends can tell, my family can tell, you can probably tell too. There's a Jesus story in Luke 10 about balancing doing for God and being with God. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Mary was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Can you imagine her stomping her foot? Tell her to help me. "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Wow. I can be such a Martha. Like you could write my name right here in Scripture. And you know what? I would be okay with that because I'm not calling the kettle black. I own my task-driven tendencies. But like me and my too often busyness, Martha is missing an opportunity, right? She's missing the opportunity for healthy emotional discipleship because she is doing for God instead of being with God. Now here's how I think this day went. Martha and Mary are just hanging out. Maybe they are scrapbooking. Maybe they are creating Instagram content. I don't know. But they're just hanging out one day until something, drop everything, happens and they need to get busy. They need to get busy. Jesus and his disciples stop by. I'd already be stressed. I would already be wondering, how am I going to serve him? What am I going to do? No phone call, no text, just a drop-in. Jesus. But it was Jesus, so they make it work. Mary is very clear where her priority is. She sits down next to Jesus, a space that is usually reserved for men, but she owns it. She claims it. She is right there, so glued in. She's so glued in fact, that she does not notice Martha, who has just gone into full Tasmanian devil mode as she is whipping around the house like a tornado. Mary is taking advantage of the opportunity to be with Jesus. Martha, not so much. Martha is freaking out. Where is my good apron? Will the food be ready in time? Will there be enough food? Is the sink clean? Did I flush the toilet? She is wondering all these things. You get the picture. She's worried. She's working and unable to enjoy Jesus and her guests. In her busyness to serve, she doesn't understand that this is the perfect time to be with her Lord. I love that Martha wants to give her guests a great experience, but in her doing for God, she forgets the being with God. She even says, "Jesus, tell her to help me." Oh, dear, sweet Martha. Her tasks for Jesus have taken priority over being with Jesus. Has this ever happened to you? Are you like Mary? Do you have some daily healthy push-back measures, some parameters in place so that you have space with God? Is Jesus your center of gravity because your time with him just centers you? Is it a priority to pause regularly and listen to him? Or are you more like Martha? Are you easily irritated, hurried, fragmented, and uncentered? Is your to-do list taking a priority over your time with God? Or are you irritable and cranky and frazzled because you're distracted with all the tasks? Let's get practical. What changes do you need to implement in your life to balance doing for God and being with God? Maybe you start your day with prayer because that's the best time of day for you. Prayer and devotions in the morning is when you're at your best. Maybe you start prayer journaling. Maybe when you're tucked in for the night, all nice and cuddled up, you recall in your mind 3 God moments from the day, and you just take time to name it and claim it and praise it to your Lord. Maybe you play Christian music or listen to a great Christian podcast as you work around the house. Time with God. Maybe you accomplish both the physical health and the spiritual health by taking daily walks and noticing God in nature. Or you start saying no. You start saying no to some of the tasks, some of the asks in your life. Be who Christian author Lisa TerKeurst says, choose your very best yes. Saying yes saying yes to God's plan and no to other commitments helps you live with a safeguard, helps you live aligned to God's will. Implementing just one act of being with God and releasing one act of doing for God will help you in your transformation journey toward emotionally healthy discipleship. Balance is key. A third failure that undermines deep discipleship and keeps us from becoming spiritually mature is when we ignore the history, the treasure of church history. I'm not a history buff, but I think it's awesome if you are. I'm married to a history lover. It never fails. If we are camping and we're hiking near a battlefield or near any other place of significant history, I can be well on my way and Steve is 20 feet behind me because you know what? He is reading every plaque along the way, trying to learn so much about what happened in 1852 and how that affected us today. That's great for him. But if we shut the door on learning how what we believe fits into the larger tapestry of religion in our world, our ignorance can keep us in shallow water and inward focused. So where do you need to expand your knowledge and understanding of church history and religion? I love being brother in Christ. It's who I am to my core. But I also like learning about other religions and being in other places where people worship different than me. In 2012, I was on a missions trip to Nicaragua, and I'm at church that one Sunday with my Nicaraguan friends, and they're singing, praising God in their loudest voices, and I did not understand a single word they were saying. But I smiled and enjoyed the worship of that culture and in that time. And I have been treated like the guest of honor at an Amish wedding where the bishop who is marrying the couple, they stand way far away from each other. But the bishop is here and he is preaching the entire meditation, which is hours long, by the way, the entire meditation in German. And I'm just sitting there thinking, wow, this is not how I marry people, but it's okay, it's different. And the only words I understood, friends, was when he would name a person from the Bible, because you know what? Daniel in German sounds very much like Daniel in English. So I was able to track with him for a bit. There is such a richness in learning from the brothers and sisters who came before us, whose worship style is different from ours, and learning the why behind the what of our own practices here at Crossroads, which is very rich. Have you ever thought about the significance of our communion bread, why it looks the way it does? Here's a historical beauty piece for you. When we make the communion bread and serve it here several times a year, there is a special rolling pin that we use. There is a special pan that we use to put the dough in. It scores and cuts through the dough. Our communion bread makers use a 3-pronged fork to make 5 puncture holes in each piece of communion bread. The 3-pronged fork is for the Trinity. The 5 puncture holes are to remember, the 5 wounds of Christ on the cross. Who would have thought? Who would have known? It's cool, right? By learning church history, we can feel a part of our faith that came before us. Let's not undermine our spiritual discipleship by ignoring the treasures of church history. Our last failure that undermines deep discipleship and keeps us from being spiritually immature is that we define success wrongly. I can own that I need to work on each of these failures, and some of them came out loud and clear in my discipleship personal assessment. Maybe you have some work to do too, like me. And number 4, we define success wrongly is a humbling realization, because we live in a time and in a culture where success is important. We feel great, right, when we achieve our goals. Maybe some of you can relate to some of these measures of success. I'm successful if my kids respect me and love me, if I have deep relationships that bring me joy. I'm successful if I have inner peace, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm successful if I can handle setbacks with confidence and if I accept everything about me. And I'm successful if I'm living my best life, not trying to impress others. And the list goes on and on. These are certainly measures of success, but there's another definition of success that I want us to lean into today. Success, according to Scripture, is becoming the person God calls you to become and doing what God calls us to do in His way and according to His timetable. Jesus calls us to do life with Him, to stay connected to Him, to abide in Him, walking with Jesus and allowing Him to lead each of us along our discipleship journey. John 15 paints a beautiful picture of what it looks like to abide in Jesus, to become who God calls you to be and to do what God calls you to do. It's the beautiful word picture of a healthy green plant that produces great fruit because it's connected to the vine. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done to you. For this is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. I wonder what it would look like for us as individuals and as a church if this was how we define success. The gardener is close by. He is close enough to know what each branch needs to bear more fruit along the way. And sometimes what the branch needs, what we need, is a bit of pruning. Pruning takes our discipleship to new levels. But pruning can be so painful, right? Just because we're designed to bear fruit doesn't mean the process will be easy. Fruit is produced in our life when we make an effort to stay connected to Jesus. It's a moment-by-moment decision to follow Christ actively, being who He's called you to be in His time. In closing, I want you to think about something. Imagine you're holding a cup of coffee, and someone comes along and they bump you, and coffee spills out of your cup. As much as you try to keep it all in, coffee spills out. Why did you spill coffee? You'll say, because somebody bumped me, Dawn. But friends, that would be the wrong answer. You spilled coffee because there was coffee in your cup. Had there been tea in your cup, you would have spilled tea. Hot chocolate, hot chocolate. If there was water in your cup, you would have spilled water. Whatever is inside your cup is what spills out. The same is true for life. When life comes along and shakes you, which will happen, whatever is inside you will come out. Sometimes you can fake it and pretend it's okay, but sometimes we get rattled. And what is inside us, either right there at the surface or buried deep inside, bubbles up and flows out because our cup has been shaken. as we walk with Jesus, let's ask ourselves, what's in my cup? What spills over? Is it joy and gratitude and peace and humility? Because those are the things that you're working to grow in your discipleship journey. Or is what spills out anger and bitterness and emotional insecurity and victim mentality? Life provides the cup. You choose how to fill it. I am excited for this journey together. I want to be alongside you as your discipleship grows. This week, please think about the journey ahead. I am rooting for you. And if you'd like to respond to the message, there's a couple ways on your connection card that you can do that. I need to work on pooling together my love for God and my love for others. Maybe that's you. Maybe you need to work on growing your time with God or learning from other Christians and from the history of the church. Or maybe you're at a space where God is just tugging your heart, asking you, hey, let me prune you. Let me help you become the most beautiful Christ follower you can be.
Thanks again for listening. Any step you take towards Jesus is a step in the right direction. You can find out more about us at crbic.org. That's crbic.org.